Hi, everyone. Rabbi Zaslow here from Beth El. And this week's Parsha is Parshat Chukat. Chukat opens with what is seen as the classic chok, the classic kind of law that we cannot understand. The Parsha begins with the law, the chok of para aduma, the instructions that are given around removing impurity by using the ashes of a absolutely perfect red cow. When the commentators look at this section, they say, it doesn't make any sense. Why would God ask us to burn a perfect cow and then use its ashes in order to remove impurity from ourselves? And they answer their own question by saying sometimes when we're in relationship with God, then we can't understand the different laws, the different mitzvot, the different commandments that we've been given. That's one way of looking at the opening of this week's Parsha. Another way of looking at it is that death is something that confuses us. And the way that impurity comes to people, at least in the Torah, is by encountering death. So when the Torah is explaining the laws of para aduma, it says that if you, as a person, come in contact with someone who dies, or someone who dies happens to be close to you, then you need to undergo this ritual of being sprinkled by the ashes of the perfect red cow. It could be that this is really saying that when we encounter death, something inside us, spiritually and emotionally, has shifted, has changed, and we are in need of a transitionary object, a transitionary ritual in order to bring us back to life, in order to bring us back to this world of the living. And that the ununderstandable chok, the impossible to understand commandment of taking this red cow's ashes and sprinkling it on us is just as befuddling to us as death, and is that ritual that we use in order to bring us back into this world after really hard transitions. Now, even though today we don't practice this ritual, we do have the rabbinic substitute for it. So if you've ever been to a cemetery, then you might have seen a fountain, a hand washing fountain by the entrance and exit of a cemetery. And so we ritually wash the tumah, wash the impurity, or wash the emotional and spiritual experience of being in a cemetery and being with the dead off of our hands in order to exit the cemetery, in order to go back into the world of the living. The sprinkling of the water with the cow's ashes and the washing of the hands when we leave the cemetery are both ways that Jews in ancient times and Jews today have encountered the transition between death and life. The rest of the Parsha is really jam-packed with that transition itself. We see the death of Miriam. We see Moshe hitting the rock instead of speaking to it. And then he's told by Hashem, by God, that he won't be entering into the promised land. And following that, we see the death of Aaron. The three main leaders of the Jewish people in Parshat Chukat are kind of like pushed into the back. There needs to be a new generation of leadership. So while the Parsha opened with this idea of life and death transitions, we also see that transitions take place in all sorts of ways. So we have communal transitions, like transitions of leadership, and we have interpersonal, personal transitions, like that between life and death. The end of the Parsha really brings us to a standstill, because the people will now be in the plains of Moab, in the area of Jordan, across the Jordan River from the city of Jericho. And we're going to stay here with Bnei Israel, really for the rest of the book of Numbers, for the rest of the book of Bamidbar, and for the book of Devarim, for the book of Deuteronomy. They're not going to move at all. So the 40 years of wandering have really come to an end, and the Torah will end with us still in Moab, still in Jordan. It's only after the Torah in the book of Joshua that the people will enter into the land of Israel. So the 40 years of the desert are kind of coming to a major pause within this week's Parsha. Shabbat Shalom.